Alrighty, it is another live Penguins chat here from the Pittsburgh Sports Live studios, high above Market Square. Hey, I'm Dan Kingerski. I think the sound is pretty good. I'm looking at the levels. I checked it with my headphones. Let me just chuck those back over my briefcase. So we're going to talk a lot about Phil Kessel in this episode, and it's really, I think this is fascinating. I mean, utterly fascinating. The behind-the-scenes chess match in which the two sides aren't even playing each other. They're both playing the rest of the league. I find this really interesting. We'll talk about the Kessel situation, specifically as it relates to the Penguins. We will talk about potential trade destinations for Kessel. Now that Minnesota is out, and you have to figure there's a handful of other teams that are just common sense out. So we're going to go through that as well. I want you on the chat board here on this show. Let me scroll down. I hate my buddy Joe. Joe is the Pittsburgh Hockey Now partner, and he's my partner in National Hockey Now as well. He sets these chats up for me because I have not yet found all the buttons to set these live chats up, and he sometimes forgets and uses that god-awful picture of like the very first day we were in the studio, and I was just testing it out. The Dan Kingerski Show. That lasted about a week. We very quickly realized I wasn't interested enough to talk about Pirates and Steelers and the rest of the sports world. Here's where I live, kids. We live on the ice. By the way, big props to our friends at Boston Hockey Now. Great story yesterday. I'm not sure if you saw it. Ray Bork just kind of gushed a little bit about Charlie McAvoy. If you haven't, do me a favor and go check it out. So, hey, thank you. Like, share. In fact, let me share right now. Let me take a quick pause and do that. Well, actually, I'm going to keep talking. The original title of the episode was also, Is Kessel Holding the Penguins Hostage? I was like, maybe that is just a little bit over the top, a little further than what I think I might want to project. Because, well, I mean, let's be honest. If Kessel were thought of in the same breath that Penguins fans think of Jack Johnson, I could get away with that. But the headline might have been a little aggressive for a player who's essentially beloved. Let's talk a bit about that, first of all. Let's get right in. Where's my boy? Here he is. Talk to me about Kessel. Because it wasn't like when Bill Guerin arrived in 2009 at the trade deadline. It caught everybody off guard, but the fans just said, you know what? You're the guy, Guerin. You're the guy who's going to help Sid and Malkin win the cup this year. And the place exploded. His family thought it was cool. You know, his kids were holding up signs. Remember that? Bill Guerin's my dad. That love affair was immediate. When Kessel was acquired, don't forget, here's how short a lot of memories are. People, the trolls who really should be beaten with a bag of wrenches, love to just nitpick little things. They forget that back in the summer of 2015, it was this guy, not on the screen, it was this guy saying you would love Phil Kessel. Let's get back to Kessel now. Oh, Kingerski doesn't know what he's talking about. And even as of late February, early March 2016, Kessel didn't have a great fan base. Penguins win the cup, and suddenly it was Phil Kessel's doing. Talk to me about this love affair. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't. Don't take it that way. Please don't take it that way. Take it the way is, I look at Pittsburgh sports. Your favorite Pirates are guys whose uniforms are dirty, who have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, A.J. Burnett. Also one of my favorite Pirates, too, by the way. Garrett Cole. Your Steelers. The Steelers are built, absolutely built on a foundation of just a raw, gritty, defensive philosophy. And yet, Kessel really doesn't embody any of that. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't be a Phil Kessel fan. I still think he could be one of the most, or he was at least, and could be again, one of the most dynamic snipers in the game. When he would streak down the right side in Toronto and fire it past a goalie, they would forget he was an American for 30 seconds and go ballistic, go bonkers. Until, the frustrations of not winning a Stanley Cup kind of overrode all of that, and they wanted Kessel to be the upfront leader and captain, and as I think we've all come to know, that's not Phil. So talk to me a little bit about all of this, all of that, because now we're at the end, right? We are at the end of the Phil Kessel tenure with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's going to be dealt. It's a matter of when, not if. And I was a little bit surprised when Kessel nixed the trade to Minnesota. My timeline, my replies on Twitter were largely full of Kessel support. And that really took me aback. I guess I should have seen it coming. I was surprised at how many people sided with the player over the team. And I'd been kind of building to that, knowing it was coming. And yet it still surprised me. I have no idea why. But obviously, you know the deal by now, that Zucker was coming to Pittsburgh and Kessel was going to Minnesota. I guess there was some talk of swapping bad contracts. Presumably, the Athletic tossed out a couple names who are bad contracts without actually saying they were in the discussion. Raskin and Jack Johnson. Do I have Jack Johnson? Wait, got this guy anyway. Hey, Lan, glad you could join us. So, we don't actually know if Jack Johnson was in the Minnesota deal. Now I want to look ahead a little bit, because now the chess match really begins. I had asked the question of a couple of our sources and gotten kind of a him-ha answer. I didn't think it was actually, how should I put it? I didn't expect the answer that Bob McKenzie on Leafs Lunch yesterday gave. I asked the question, would Kessel put some teams on his 8-team list that he knows can't acquire him to kind of shrink the pool? Well, McKenzie went further than that and said it's common practice to load up the list of your acceptable teams with teams who can't acquire you, so that you really get a virtual no-trade clause and you get to pick your destination. I find that entirely fascinating. Where would Kessel want to go? I mean, where would Phil Kessel want to go? I don't know. Subtle imagery. If you're not paying attention, you missed that, I guess. Send lawyers guns and money. It's about to hit the fan. If Kessel did that, realize where do the Penguins go from there? Because I am working on a story for tomorrow where I'm trying to think of teams that Kessel would accept a deal to. And based on the Jason Zucker example, Zucker makes $5.5 million. He had only 42 points last season, 21 goals, 21 assists. That's not great production for $5.5 million. I think that's kind of on the low end. So, but the Penguins were going to be accepting that sort of an offer. Where do the Penguins go from there? I mean, first of all, they lost all of their leverage. Once it got around the league that the Penguins were going to accept a 42-point guy who makes $5.5 million for Kessel, well, do you think some team's going to try to beat that offer? Do you think some team's going to call up Jim Rutherford out of the goodness of their heart and say, boy, Jim, I don't think you were getting enough from Minnesota. Tell you what, how about I sweeten that offer that they were going to give you? And I'll toss in a Ferrari, too. What the hell? All's fair in love and war, and this is war right now for the Penguins. So teams are not going to beat that Minnesota offer. And now that all the cards are on the table, the Penguins lost their leverage over the rest of the league, or what little leverage they might have had to say, well, we've got other suitors. They really don't. Now everyone knows Kessel's going to take a hard line, and what the Penguins asked, or accepted in this case. Arizona. You take a look down the Coyotes roster, and it really doesn't line up well for a Penguins deal. Not even a little bit, you know. The closest thing I can come up with from Arizona, and my sound's a little bit hot, I apologize. The closest thing I can come up with Arizona is Alex Galchenyuk. Now, we media pukes link the Penguins to Galchenyuk forever. The reality, the very stark reality, is that no source has ever told, or I should say there's never been a story published in which the Penguins were linked to talks for Galchenyuk with Montreal. What Pittsburgh Hockey Now was the first to report last summer, the Penguins made a run at Max Domi, who was dealt for Alex Galchenyuk, and that's probably as close as it got. Galchenyuk makes $4.9 million. Was he the leading scorer in Arizona with 47 points last year? That's about the only thing that would make sense. And would Arizona take on Kessel? Now, I will tell you this. It is general consensus around, bouncing off the walls at PPG that Kessel would happily play for Rick Tocchet. I don't think Kessel might waive his contendership to go to Arizona. We don't know that, but we know that Kessel really liked to play for Arizona, Tocchet, and I think that's been discussed unofficially around the barn. Whispers off walls, and that's as much as I'll say about it, right? I can't tell you any source told us that specifically because no one has. Just, it became general consensus. Enough people accepting it as fact down there generally leads to some credence in my book. That's all Arizona has. Look, and if Arizona holds a firm line, they have no money. Kessel really could, if he stacked his 8-team list here, he could force that kind of a deal where the Penguins only get draft picks back. What would be fair? A couple second-rounders? You're not going to get a mid-first rounder for Phil Kessel. Not at 31 and not with the collapsing market. You don't get a mid-first round pick for Kessel. So a couple second-rounders, and the Penguins have to eat some money because otherwise Arizona can't pay the light bill. At least not until they're Houston Coyotes anyway. All right, second team I've come up with. Drum roll, please. Anyway. Here's the second team I've come up with. And this is the one where I look at it and say, okay, that might make a bit of sense. Here's one guy who makes a little bit of sense. Michael Frolik is a $4+ million player who only had a 37 points in 65 games last season. He's not a guy who lit up the just. Now, I know I had a picture of Sam Bennett somewhere, too. So I'll go back to Calgary. Sam Bennett would be another guy. At 22 years old, his contract is up. Bennett, in the last 3 years, has scored 26, 26, and 27 points. But he's only 22, and the Penguins might find a bit of that Jared McCann formula for Bennett. And here's why Calgary is at the top of my list as plausible destinations. Bill Peters, their head coach, coached Carolina for 4 seasons. Carolina was a bit of an offensive, soft team. I think that's fair, right? They played with speed, but he didn't exactly crack the whip too hard in Carolina. And when he went to Calgary, they have a lot of offensive talent up there. Sean Monahan, etc. And he got everyone on the same page. He organized that offensive talent up there, and some guys had career years, great years up in Calgary as they won their first division in 13 years. I think that's it, 2006. Sounds about right when they went to the Cup final against Tampa Bay. Occasionally my memory is not Swiss cheese, although if I'm wrong, I'm going to use the Swiss cheese defense. And that's where I go with it. I think Peters is a coach that can handle Kessel, and Kessel can handle Bill Peters. I think Calgary has assets to give and could afford a Phil Kessel. So that's as far as I've got on my. I'm trying to write for tomorrow 5 teams that make sense. I'm at 2. Yeah, just top of my head. I'm going around the Western Conference. L.A., rebuilding? No. Anaheim, at the end of their run? Probably not. If I were Phil Kessel and contending were that important to me, I would not accept Anaheim. Anaheim's going to have to go through a pretty swift and severe rebuild, I think, with Getzlaf and Perry kind of hitting the end for them, right? They've got some decent young players in Anaheim. But can you hear the rain hitting the window not far away? All right, that's 18 minutes. Down goes Bob. I keep knocking Bob over. Let me hit the message board here. Best thing I read online was Kessel rejected the trade because JJ was in it. Man, you guys just give Jack Johnson no quarter. Everything the Pens want to do this offseason is contingent on a Kessel trade. I actually think that is true, Chris, because the Penguins don't have enough cap space to do anything else. Can this get ugly, or the Pens just give him away for cap space? In Jim Rutherford's chair, I would do that. I think there are some nice free agents the Penguins could make a run at, but I don't know. And I should do this article perhaps before I do the 5 destinations or just after the 5 destinations. A mathematical breakdown of what it would take to replace all that Phil Kessel means to the Penguins lineup on the ice. Spoiler alert, since you're on the chat here, it would take about a 50, 55-point player who's defensively responsible. Maybe a little bit of jam in his game, too, wouldn't hurt. And that's it. If a player were, say, a +10 with 50, 55 points, the Penguins have enough power play guys that Jake Gensel could step right in for Phil Kessel. And I don't think they would miss too much of a beat, right? So that great strength is mitigated by the Penguins' depth, and a little bit of defensive help wouldn't hurt either. Let's see here. Aaron, do I think the loss of leverage in a Kessel move will make 71 move any more likely? No. No, if anything, I'm down. I'm very sour on a potential Malkin move at this point. I think the iron was hot for a second. I think the Penguins. In fact, I know the Penguins received some calls. By the way, if you want to get into sports journalism or media or even public, take a look at some of the crap I have to go through. Can you read that on the screen there? Yeah, I don't think so. Long story short, some guy who's clearly not a fan of mine just insulting me up one side and down the other because, well, no one can trust me, according to him. He said that I was disproven on the Malkin story. You know, the Malkin trade rumors are real story. He said, oh, everyone else said it was fake. So he listed Elliot Friedman as one of the ones who said they were fake, and I kindly linked right to the Elliot Friedman article in which he said they weren't fake and said other teams believe there's something to it. And his response was, well, it depends on what your definition of real is. Again, where's my bag of wrenches? Just smack him over the head. I learned a while ago when I first started this. Those of you who have been with me for a few years or last 4 or 5 years, I've been working in Pittsburgh. No, I was a bit thin-skinned at first. I was so shocked that when I would report a fact that somebody would so vehemently question the veracity of anything like that. Like, oh, you're just lying. Like, but I can't show you the text of the people I'm talking to. I've gotten quite used to it and find it a bit humorous. Hopefully you do too. But no, I don't think Malkin move is A, likely, and B, I don't think the Penguins would make a Malkin move as a second place move. You just don't move Evgeny Malkin to free up cap space. You free up Evgeny Malkin if the relationship cannot be saved, and I don't think that to be the case. I never have, but I also know that it was touch and go for a few minutes when either side could have said the wrong thing, you know? Malkin could have said, I'm not having it. And the Penguins could have drawn a hard line. I don't think that to be the case. We haven't seen any smoke in 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. That's a pretty good sign for keeping Evgeny Malkin. Let's see here. There's a player in Arizona that can get him the puck and are closer to contending the Y. Oh, that's sarcasm, right, Chris? I don't know. I think Derek Stepan could get Kessel the puck, yeah? I think he could do that. Do you think Kessel is selfish for this? No, I don't. I'm a little surprised at the hard line. In Kessel's shoes, I probably would go to the Penguins and say, okay, here's an expanded list. Make it happen. That's how, look, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying how in his shoes, kind of how I would roll. But he's got every right, No, I don't think it's selfish. Do you think he is being lazy on and off the ice in the fact that he just doesn't want to move teams? No, I don't think it's laziness at all there. No first rounder, but his fans say his value is the same as any other star player. Man, you're hammering away, Chris. You're baiting me. I'm not gonna take the bait. This is a nice forum that I do. This is the Happy Dan, not Bud Moonshine. It would smack you around a little bit. No, you simply have to look at the market. Now, look, if Jim Rutherford pulls a mid-first rounder, I'll be the first to say that he was right, or the fans were right, and Kessel's value was high, and Craig Button was right. I just look at Jason Zucker. 2 years ago, he had 60 points, but that was an aberration. Otherwise, 4 of the past 5 years, he's been in the 40s. That's what he is, And that's what the Penguins were getting for Phil Kessel. I didn't think the salary cap floor was a thing until the Coyotes barely cleared it a couple of years ago. Not only barely cleared it, they acquired players that didn't have to pay Pavel Datsyuk to meet the cap floor. Oh, that's right, Christopher. I forgot. You are part of the great Western Canadian tradition. See a ton of Frolik here. Solid two-way player. Yep, 20-goal potential. I'm not so sure about that anymore, right? I kind of think he's settled into a happy defensively, defense first 15-goal kind of deal, right? What about the Jets? I don't see the Jets going for Kessel. They've got Laine, right? And Wheeler and Brian Little. I don't know that Kessel would fit. Winnipeg likes thump in their lineup, and I think their quota of offensive guys is met. Of course, they had a pretty early offseason too. I just don't see them retooling with a 31-year-old guy. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. No one knows. I think Kessel and his agent know. I think Jim Rutherford is finding out. L.A. makes some sense. I don't see L.A. If Kessel wants to live in L.A., okay. I don't, you'll forgive me. I caught a bug with my eye on Monday, riding around, and it has been just watering for a couple days. Yes, I wear a helmet when I ride my motorcycle. Thanks for not preaching just yet, but I keep the visor up at all possible, if at all possible. And I caught a bug. Just so I'm riding kind of one eye, flicking whatever the heck was left. Yeah, what happened to Reddit, by the way? Mutation says Reddit gross. I kid you not. A year ago, I loved hanging out on Reddit. We did, Matt Geitka and I did a Reddit AMA chat during the Philadelphia series. In fact, Shelley was part of it too. I was at the arena in Philly. Matt was here in Pittsburgh, and Shelley was also part of it. We had a blast. We had a really great relationship. Matt, unfortunately, with my knowledge, included that Anthony Duclair Instagram in one of his stories. Now, Matt had a source that told Matt that the Penguins had talked to Duclair, so Matt reported that, but he included that Instagram. And just some of those guys on Reddit would not forgive me. And ever since then, we've kind of been persona non grata over there. Anytime someone posts one of our stories on it, you just see these ugly negative comments. I don't get it. I tend to think there's a blog which has infiltrated that and just goes after it, almost in a sad fit of jealousy, but I don't know. What chance a Kessel deal gets done before, during the draft? Good question, Ryan. I'm going to tell you, I can't say 100%. I'd put it at 75 to 80. I think the Penguins would like to restock their draft pool now without waiting till next year. Because, I mean, think about that. It's almost worth taking a little bit less to get it now. It's like putting your money in an investment. Sure, you can wait a year and maybe get a slightly higher return, but you can't make up the year that you lost. And the Penguins can't make up that year of development on a prospect that they would lose by waiting until next June's draft to recoup that pick. My 2 cents on that. If that makes any sense. If I tie the analogies appropriately to you. With some time to reflect, By the way, thanks for coming, Mutation. I made him an admin on these chats a while ago because a few trolls had shown up. Do you think it's wise to trade Johnson like so many people seem to want? I think if a team would give some value for Johnson, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world. I am not advocating it. I really liked what Goodbranson brought to the Penguins. And by the boy, this is going to be, thanks, Mutation. You're going to set me up for another dissertation here. I need like a chalkboard back here. Start writing notes for y'all or yins. Probably tired of looking at my face. Here. There's the grandson going after my pizza. How's that? He's a go-go gadget arms. Comes across the table. He's not yet 11 months old. Still not quite walking. He walks with one hand on the furniture. Walks all over the place, but always with one hand on something. Anywho, there. Look at Leo. Anyway, I know fans, and I know a lot of the internet-based writers have this mantra and this die-hard belief that every defenseman should be mobile, puck-moving. And they compare every defenseman to that specific mold. And you need 3 of those guys. You want one of those guys on every pairing. But you also need a little thump, a little net clear, a little ugliness. I liked having Johnson and Goodbranson with the Penguins. Oop. I knocked down the beer. It'll be all fizzy now. But it's also not entirely... You know what? Let's look at Leo some more. You know, the Indy 500 is one of my holy days. And Leo seemed to take to racing, too. Did you see just even the last several laps? So that was just a fun race to watch, start to finish. See, he walks around the house, always with one hand on something. Anywho, I think having 2 thumpers on the Penguins' blue line is not a bad thing. But I also think the Penguins could upgrade there with maybe a more all-round defender. The Penguins don't have any all-round defenders. They either have defensive defensemen or offensive defensemen. Chris Letang and Brian Dumoulin. Although Dumoulin might be able to be a Paul Martin all-round kind of guy. He played surprisingly well on the right side there. Oli Mata will be dealt. Mata had the chance to be that all-round guy. He certainly was as a rookie. But I think at this point I would say he's a below-average all-round guy. Justin Schultz is an offensive guy. Branson is more, who was surprisingly agile with the puck, is a bit of a tough guy. He's more of a tough guy. And Pettersson is nice with the puck. But there again, his strength lies in defending more than the offensive side. The Penguins could use, some all-season tires on that blue line, I think. So, there. If a team would offer the Penguins an all-round defenseman because they wanted to get a little more thump and add Jack Johnson, I kind of think Edmonton or Detroit might be a landing spot for Jack Johnson if they feel like they're closer to winning and taking on a 31-year-old. And here's what Pittsburgh fans greatly missed about Jack Johnson. You know what? Hang on one quick second. I want to make sure that there's enough juice in the phone. Okay, so as I was saying about Jack Johnson, he is largely credited inside the Columbus dressing room and the organization. It was a little bit of an ugly end because people's feelings were hurt. Johnson was a bit of their, I guess I mentioned him earlier, a bit of their A.J. Burnett. He was one of the forefront guys, one of the leaders changing that culture. It wasn't long ago, 5, 6 years ago, Columbus was all but a laughingstock because every top 5 pick they had was a Russian who washed out or a guy who just never clicked, and they wasted a string of great top draft choices. I mean, they had just miserable luck. Johnson was one of the guys who led the transformation of attitude inside the Columbus room. He really got no credit for any of that here in Pittsburgh. None. A team like Detroit that might want to compete sooner than later, I think Steve Yzerman might, I think he might even take a look. I don't think Jack Johnson gets dealt. I'd place the odds at 5%, maybe 10% on the high end. But if we're talking about it, I'll kind of give you my thoughts on it anyway. What about San Jose? For Kessel, San Jose is old. Pavelski's a UFA. Erik Karlsson's a UFA. No one knows what their team is going to look like. If San Jose signed everybody quickly, they got Karlsson locked up, or at least get Pavelski lined up, get a commitment from Joe Thornton to come back next season, publicly, loudly, then, yeah, I guess I'd say San Jose could work. I don't know that Kessel. I don't know that San Jose is the kind of town Kessel wants to be in, though. I'm not bagging on San Jose. It really is a small town. When I was there for the 2016 final, which was my first trip to San Jose, I didn't find a lot of great things to do. Maybe I missed them. Please forgive me. Little Italy in San Jose, I kid you not, they had this lovely iron gate over this side street. It said Little Italy. It's gorgeous. There was one restaurant. One restaurant. This lovely White House that served a few Italian dishes and a barbecue place right beside it. That was Little Italy in San Jose. I don't know that some of Kessel's hobbies would, how would I make hobby an adjective? His hobbinical preferences. I'm making up words now. I don't think San Jose would meet those, but I don't know. That's my 2 cents. You might say, he'd be a perfect fit there, and I don't think you'd be wrong. And I wouldn't argue with you. Don't mean to bait me. You know what? That's the fun part about this, right? I can't wait until this Kessel stuff is done, says, hello, Dad. It's getting really boring. Are you kidding me? I should show you the traffic on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. When we write a report card, substantive, deep analysis does well. Hey, Bob McKenzie talked about Phil Kessel. Boom. It's like, oh, so there's one thing among many that I learned in 25 years of doing radio. And that is, you talk about what the audience wants to talk about. You don't have to say what they say or tell, or parrot what they think. In fact, I do usually, I refuse to do that. But you live on the market's terms. And sorry, man. Sorry, hello, Dad. People want to talk about Kessel. Look at this chat. Okay, I am hoping a solid player to use now, like a Hurdle. Hurdle is far. You're not getting a Tomas Hurdle back for Phil Kessel. He's a B-level. Superstar is not the right word, but he's a B-level star. Is Hurdle. LeBanc, Sorensen, a high draft pick. Man, Brett, you are shooting for the moon in a Kessel trade. Anything else you want? Breakfast in bed, maybe? Woo! JJ is not a thumper, says ADFASDF. Well, ASDF, ADSFF is ADSASDFing wrong. He only had more hits than any Penguins defenseman in over a decade. He only kept the net front clear. I mean, if you're not going to give the guy, if you're not going to be a little bit honest, I can't help you. Did Kessel yell, "I'm out of here anyway," after the handshake versus the Isles? I didn't report that. Someone else did, actually said that in the locker room. Someone else, I don't know how to address that because I was told that in the locker room that night. A cameraman said, "Did you hear what Kessel said?" And told me that. Of course, he didn't have video of it. Take it for what it's worth. I'm telling you as much as I know about that. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. I definitely saw a few things through the season, and I saw some things that night that I chalked up to just kind of a miserable night frustration. So I didn't hold anybody to having a bad reaction to getting bounced by the Islanders. But did Kessel say that? I was told by somebody who was there, who was standing beside him, that he did. I think DK did report it, or DK reported that he was also told that. I steered away. I think he went for it. Take it for whatever it's worth, right? I personally love Johnson. He's very solid and does a lot of things right. He does. Johnson did not move the puck nearly as well as I thought he could with the Penguins. And part of that, I think, is that Jack Johnson figured his role with the team was to be a defensive defenseman and that physical side to his game. And so he focused and concentrated on that. That's my reading on it. I mean, 3 years ago, he had 40 points. The guy can play some offense. But his offense with the Penguins, I think, really atrophied. That was one of the biggest surprises of the season for me, actually. What would we get for Kessel if he went to the Coyotes? Nick, I think we mentioned earlier in the show, the only thing that would make sense would be Galchenyuk. Or if Arizona would hold firm and Kessel would hold firm, Rutherford could have the decision to take draft picks and only get draft picks or much less. Kind of Kessel is going to have a say in this matter. Nashville is an interesting team for Phil Kessel. I don't know if David Poile would do that, but I do know Nashville has to make some changes. They had an early summer. They were one of the favorites who got bounced pretty quickly again this year. So they're looking at some big changes, and that's possible. If they want to load up for, one more run, yeah. I do like the potential. Let me fix my shirt here. Getting all wrapped around here. Sitting here for 2 hours. The Islanders and Kessel. I thought about them for a moment. And then I thought Barry Trotz. And then I thought Phil Kessel. And then I thought Barry Trotz. All right. Let's see. I'm going through the chats here. Da-da-da. Yeah, look, if the Penguins do clear that space, Gustav Nyquist is available. Jordan Eberle will be available. That's why I really think the Penguins want to get that deal done. Although they were going to take Jason Zucker back from Minnesota who cost $5.5 million, and that would have essentially alleviated the Penguins' cap space a bit. I would like to see the Penguins. I think that would fit. I think a guy like Eberle, oh boy, would he be something special with the Penguins, be it with Crosby or with Malkin. I think that would be really a dynamic pairing. Of course, I thought Derek Brassard was going to be dynamic with the Penguins too. You just never know. I think the Penguins should go after UFAs like Jeff Skinner. Skinner's going to cost $8 million plus. I think he turned down $864, or at least $8 million a year with Buffalo, or that was the number floated. And the fact that the deal hasn't been done and there isn't a lot of smoke that a deal's going to get done leads me to believe that Buffalo is going to balk at $8 million, and I think that would be around the price tag. Donskoy, Zuccarello is interesting. I don't think, well, I was a big proponent of the Penguins acquiring Matt Zuccarello in the first half of the season. I think he actually could have saved the Derek Brassard situation. But, yeah, they all have speed. They can all put up some points, absolutely, in varying degrees. Zuccarello, not so much in the regular season, but mostly in the postseason. Yeah, I think, well, just take Skinner off the list. He's unaffordable. The rest of the guys, yeah, if the Penguins cleared some space, would fit. Okay, let's see here. Kevin, are they desperate enough to go within the Metropolitan? Why not, right? Why not? If Philadelphia, I mean, it was a joke by Bob McKenzie, who was saying, sure, put Philadelphia on your 8-team trade list. That'll never happen. If Philadelphia wanted Phil Kessel, I don't think he would fit there. I mean, seriously, imagine Philadelphia fans beloving a player who has 10 to 12 hits per year. Just ain't happening. But if Kessel did something like that and stacked his 8-team list with a couple Metro teams in Washington or Philadelphia or the Islanders, Carolina, and Carolina made an offer, yeah, I would do it. That would certainly make for an interesting game, wouldn't it? You would see who was happy with Kessel in that first game when somebody just plastered Kessel along the wall. That's pretty tough to do. You have to leave your post, leave your station, and make a run at it. Be interesting to see if it would, though. Can I see a Hornquist trade? Not really. Here's why. Here's why I don't see a Hornquist trade. The Penguins have lost too many glue guys over the past 3 years. They're going to lose Matt Cullen in all probability, though I still am not convinced that's certainty. Let's assume for the moment it is. And even if Cullen wanted to come back, do the Penguins have room for him anymore? You're going to lose that leadership with Cullen. Marc-Andre Fleury was a glue guy. Who else have the Penguins lost that was a bit of just kind of heart and soul part of the team? And Pascal Dupuis is who I'm trying to think of. Thanks, guys. To lose all of those guys in the last few years, and then for this year, for Rutherford to say that we weren't a team, we never came together as a team. A guy like Hornquist has more value to the Penguins, just in the off-ice capacity. Now, let's talk about the on-ice role. He had a rough second half after he came back from the concussion. There's just no question about it. But in the first 35 games, remember how many goals Hornquist had? 15. And think of how Hornquist was just a man possessed in March. He was hitting everything that moved. He was chasing the puck like a dog chases a rabbit. He was high energy, high intensity. He and Bukestad, Bukestad. Yeah, we'll call him Patrick Bukestad. Bukestad and Hornquist were just dominant. As you know, with Dominic Simone, actually, was a dominant line. Do you know how many goals I wrote this the other day. Do you know how many goals those three allowed? Or actually, two of them. Hornquist and Bukestad allowed from February 23rd to April 10th at 5-on-5. Do you know how many goals they allowed in over 200 minutes? 3. That's all. They scored only 8, however. But if that level of play were to have continued and Hornquist snapped out of his funk, got over the frustration, and it began to flow, just think of the numbers. So that's why you don't trade Patrick Hornquist. Okay, Trevor Daley. Yeah, that was an all-round defenseman who could really skate. Didn't put up great point totals, but played all ends of the rink there. Yeah, Hornquist did have, 7 goals in 8 games in the Worlds. Hopefully that was enough to wash the taste out of his mouth, too. Benino was a bit of a glue guy. Yeah, Carl Hagelin was. Connor Sherry wasn't a glue guy, but nice kid. Can you argue that Kessel is a glue guy? I cannot. I can't make that argument. I know everyone likes Kessel. I know everyone thinks he's funny. Like in the locker room, he's a bit of he's one of the clowns of the room, and I mean that in a positive way, not an insult sort of way. Every room has a cut up or a guy who makes you laugh, and Kessel's one of those guys. All right, so geez, I've done 52. Doesn't feel like almost an hour, does it? Do me a favor while I'm thinking about it, like and share this here little podcast. What other pictures can I show you? I've already shown you Leo. Oh, I am chasing a story about this guy tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have some news for you tomorrow about that guy. And as we talk about all of these trades, Jarry becomes a very interesting piece for this reason. He might put a deal over the top. And I talked about Calgary, and I'll publish this tomorrow. It'll be for PHN Extra subscribers, by the way. So, hey, subscribe to Pittsburgh Hockey Now Extra. Pretty soon you'll have multiple sites that you get subscription to. Calgary. Calgary desperately needs a goaltending solution. David Riddick was a surprise this year, but I don't think they're sold on him being a long-term number 1 goalie. Mike Smith is on his last legs. He was really not great this regular season. He was pretty good in the playoffs for a minute and pretty good down the stretch. But they have to settle on a goalie up in Calgary. What would a guy like Tristan Jarry do for a deal like that? That would be a straight need for the Calgary Flames, and that would perhaps restore some leverage for Jim Rutherford if he were to put him on the table talking with a couple teams. One of the reporters in Dallas wrote a piece that Kessel would fit in Dallas. I don't see that. I mean, look, the knock on Tyler Seguin is that he isn't always serious enough about his career, or that he's enjoyed being a hockey player sometimes a little too much. And obviously the president took he and Jamie Benn to the woodshed in mid-season. Radulov is also another guy who's not the easiest in the world to coach. I can't imagine tossing Phil Kessel into that mix. I mean, at that point, a coach could be rendered impotent, just completely cast aside. At that point, I could coach the team, walk out on to practice with a bucket of pucks, old school style, dump the pucks at center ice, yell, "Stretch out, boys," and walk off the ice. I think that's what a coach would be reduced to if Kessel went to Dallas. Jim says, I think the Pens need to target speed and sandpaper. Yeah, I think that's the route they're going. Although if you want to be real technical about it, I think speed and jam over speed and sandpaper. But that's splitting some hairs, isn't it? I think the Pens have found a very good backup into Smith. Played very well for the Penguins this season. He has. Lan asks, how about Colorado? Yes. I mean, Colorado acquired Derek Brassard, looking for some punch down in the lineup. It could work. Let me take a look here. Let me take a look at the Colorado Avalanche salary cap. Because essentially what we're looking here, we're looking for a team with a little bit of an overpaid, underproducing 45, 50-point guy, Jason Zucker, right? That's what we're looking for. So Carl Soderberg is the only guy that fits that. Otherwise, the Avalanche have just a pile of UFAs and RFAs. And Soderberg was really kind of bunk a couple years ago. He had the 51-point season when the Penguins won their first cup, 2015-16. And that summer, I'd wrote a few times. I kept putting Soderberg high on my list of potential Penguins acquisitions for that third-line center job after they lost Nick Bonino. And I think we've heard some whispers that the Penguins have checked on Soderberg a couple times over the past few years. But he had the really down year in 16-17. He didn't even have 20 points, just a miserable sort of year looking at his stats now. He rebounded this year with 49 points, 23 and 26. So that could make sense. Here's the thing, though. Soderberg at center would force Bukestad to go to right wing. And I don't know that that's, a good solution. And I don't know where the Penguins would put a guy like Soderberg on left wing. So it could happen. One of those things where because Soderberg only has one more year, maybe the Penguins would take him on and experiment and move on if it didn't work. Kind of not as much harm, not as much foul type deal. Salary-wise, he's the only guy in Colorado that really fits. Unless the Penguins could swing a deal for Tyson Barrie. Barrie makes about $5.5 million, right-handed defenseman. He's been on the trade block forever and a day. He's kind of, just pays rent for the trade block. That's as much as I got for you on Colorado. I don't think there's a lot to work with. Hey, here's Ian Cole. Maybe No, that wouldn't work, would it? Guess I'm being a smartass now, aren't I? As if I ever am not. Does the revolving door surplus of glue guys suggest an issue with Pittsburgh's motivation? I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Aaron. No, I think, obviously, Pascal Dupuis, it wasn't like the Penguins got rid of him. Marc-Andre Fleury, it kind of came to a very either-or choice. And, yeah, so I don't see what quite the revolving door. And Cullen is 42. Okay, Robert says, I am a Hawks fan. Can you tell me what they need? Because I'm dumbfounded. Well, Robert, I don't cover Chicago quite as intently. I will tell you from what I've seen, they've got some talent coming. To Brinkat, I like a lot. And I think a couple more kids on the way can revitalize Jonathan Taves, much in the same way that you saw the kids revitalize Sidney Crosby back in 15 and 16. Sometimes it takes a spark. Some goaltending in Chicago wouldn't hurt. At this point, you're holding your breath on every shot for Corey Crawford, right? With all that scoring, they should have made the playoffs. Robert, I think you're on the wrong chat, but I'm happy to have you. Do me a favor and hang around for about 15 minutes so my average stats look pretty good and I make a few more bucks, all right? Hey, if you do enjoy these chats, right beneath where you can comment is a little $. Kick a buck in the can, because I don't want to make these chats a pay-for-chat sort of thing. I like keeping them free. But as Pittsburgh hockey now is expanding to other cities, and we're going to have to adopt a more subscription-based model. I never want to be exclusively subscription. I think I'd get my ass kicked in Pittsburgh, quite frankly. I don't think I could go toe-to-toe with Josh Yohe. In fact, I know I can't. Plain and simple. I can't. I would lose, and lose going away. So my niche is that hybrid. I'm going to give you extra content for that. I'm going to give you free content and then extra content that costs. So I'll never have 20,000 subscribers, and I'll never need 20,000 subscribers because I get thousands of clicks on a story instead, which pays me pretty well. All right, kids, last call for the questions. We have done an hour 2 already, and I am getting a little hungry. It is 7:05. So last call for questions. Hit them up on the chat board. Kessel to Winnipeg. I think we talked about that earlier, right? That I don't think Kessel necessarily fits Winnipeg's mold. Winnipeg likes a bit of thump. Winnipeg also has their quota full of guys who can score and, aren't necessarily tough to play against. Line A. Blake Wheeler is, I don't know that he's easy to play against, but I don't know that he's hard to play against as well. I just don't see where Kessel would fit there. I think Kessel would need to be a top dog right winger, but also not the leader of the team. That's a small window to fit it in. All right, you got a few more seconds. Now there was, let me see what else I wanted to get to here. Getting back to Zach Aston Reese, we are going to, I presume, hopefully, we're going to hopefully have some news for you in the next couple days about the Penguins' restricted free agents. I spent today on the phone. I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up. Hopefully my competition now doesn't beat me to the stories, plural. But I think there's going to be some news that you find interesting. I found it interesting today what might happen. Not involving Zach Aston Reese. Involving one of the Penguins' other young players. We will leave it at that. Did I sufficiently tease you? Should I give a little more information in the tease? Or are you okay with that? Well, Beaver County Auto now sponsors our Steelers site and the Pitt site. They're no longer paying my bills here. They're great people, though. Really do appreciate when no one else wanted to step forward when we launched this little deal. The folks at Beaver County Auto. There is people I do want to definitely tell you about tonight. Let me find the picture. Hang on. By the way, let me load this one in real quick. Have you ever seen a kid sleep in? Well, it's not loading very quickly. Let me. Where is it? Darn it. I must have deleted my picture of all of the delicious, juicy hot wings from Redbeard's. Tonight is all-you-can-eat wings. I think it's $12.99. They might have had to add a few cents onto that because I've picked them clean a couple times in the last month. But that is, do me a favor. And if you're going to support any of our sponsors here at PittsburghHockeyNow.com, I definitely want you to support Redbeard's and tell them that you saw their ad on that hockey website, because they kind of got screwed a little bit. They came on to sponsor us beginning in April. We all presumed a Stanley Cup run, which lasted 2 weeks. So I want to pump their tires as much as humanly possible. Redbeard's, 6th Avenue downtown, which is actually just like, I can almost see it from here. And up on, wait, I can never do the weather on TV. There. That way. Like and share this here little podcast, but go to Redbeard's too. I've come to appreciate a good domestic beer list. I think I've had every craft beer on the market, excluding IPAs, and even a lot of those too. And it kind of gets to the point after a while when I've just had everything and so much of it tastes the same. Just give me a couple choices on the craft beer side. Give me a couple domestics if I want to just knock down some wings and have a crisp Miller Lite to wash it all down. That doesn't cost, $9 or $10 a glass. That's the kind of stuff I appreciate. All right. Oh, how about Buffalo, Matt asks. Ooh. Kessel to Buffalo. Let me think about that. Let me take a look at Buffalo's salary cap list. Buffalo cap friendly. I had not considered Buffalo. But full props to you, Matt, for throwing that at me. It does kind of work off the top of my head. Sam Reinhart will be a restricted free agent after next year. He's at $365. He had a bit of a resurgent year. I don't think they would give him up for Kessel. Connor Sherry makes $3 million. Oh, wait. Wouldn't that be funny? Trade Sherry for Kessel. Scott Wilson. Anybody over 6 feet tall? Anybody? Let's see here. Marco Scandella, $4 million, defenseman. I don't know where they would shoehorn him in. Here's something that might be interesting. Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, Jason Botterill was asking prospective head coaching candidates how they're going to help him get back on track. Maybe the Penguins would sweeten the deal. Ristolainen makes 5.4. And the Penguins, in theory, could make space on their blue line. That's the best I got for you, if you want to talk Buffalo. Anyway, that's the best I got. All right, kids, I appreciate you more than you know. Check out PittsburghHockeyNow.com. Subscribe to Pittsburgh or PHN Extra. Check out Boston Hockey Now, and check out our brand new site. No, I'm not going to tell you yet. All right, we'll do this again next Wednesday afternoon. We'll go Wednesday afternoon next time. Until then, have fun.